We are taking you for an in-depth walk through Midtown Manhattan. We'll be looking at the avenues, we'll go to the Upper West Side, Central Park, Times Square, some art museums, and other attractions. This detailed visit is a practical guide that shows you how to get the most out of visiting New York. You might be surprised to see how much green park space is available in the middle of Manhattan. Along with some tiny mid-block parks, there's Bryant Park, which is almost a whole city block. One of the highlights we'll be showing you as we walk around through Midtown. Walking up 6th Avenue, down 5th, we'll take a look at Madison, Park Avenue, a grand boulevard stroll with many urban highlights like ice skating at Rockefeller Center and the tall, huge office buildings of that complex. Find someplace to eat, have a walk through Grand Central, and admire the modern architecture of Midtown. And be amazed by some huge public artworks like this stable by Alexander Calder, taking you all the way to the Upper East Side.
Let's go take a walk uptown. We're going to take a look at Madison Avenue, Lexington Avenue, we'll be on 5th Avenue, all the great streets of the city.
Starting out at Bryant Park, located between 5th and 6th Avenue and 40th and 42nd Street, one of New York's most popular and beloved spots, complete with its share of eccentric characters.
So you want to live godly in Christ Jesus, you must be ready to suffer persecution, okay?
Nice view of the Empire State Building. The park is located right next to the main building of the New York Public Library, and underneath the park are many of the stacks of the library, so it's only appropriate that they have a reading room here. Free newspapers, books, magazines, public readings, coffee, and it's been happening ever since 1935, but not in the winter. This little oasis is named after a writer, William Cullen Bryant, who's immortalized in bronze. It's a busy place visited by more than 6 million people every year, open every day, and all seasons. It's a little bit different in the wintertime, and there is something special going on. You can go ice skating for free, or if you don't have skates, you can rent them for a modest fee. This land was purchased by the city way back in 1822 and initially used as a cemetery for poor people. And then in the 1840s, it became a huge reservoir holding most of New York City's water. The impressive library building was completed in 1911, and the park itself opened in 1934. From here, we are beginning our march uptown along 6th Avenue, very much into the heart of Midtown Manhattan. You'll see that New York is the place to go because it's the world's greatest and most important city. It is just one of the most interesting places you could ever visit, energized by a special diversity and intensity of life. This massive row of corporate headquarters along the west side of 6th Avenue are built in that glass box international style, standing shoulder to shoulder in one of the world's most impressive urban lineups. Formerly the headquarters of such global titans as Exxon and McGraw-Hill, Time Warner, and Payne Weber, they're now diversified office spaces and home to the New York Hilton, leading us to Radio City and Rockefeller Center. During winter, the Lower Plaza features an ice skating rink looked over by the huge bronze statue of Prometheus. Rockefeller Center is one of the city's major urban developments, home to media companies and hundreds of other businesses. These fountains called the Channel Gardens because they separate the British and French buildings here. 250,000 people passing through its 19 buildings daily. When hunger strikes, many of them hit the lunch wagon. Midtown has a tremendous density of places, people, attractions, and landmarks which await your discovery. And the best way to experience it, of course, is on foot. You'll never run out of interesting sights. And while you're strolling along, enamored by the famous avenues, don't just walk past the side streets. They have got some fascinating things to check out, such as West 46th Street, packed with restaurants, bars, and stores. You'll get souvenirs cheaper than at Times Square. And you'll find some affordable places to eat. We're a few blocks further north at the West 53rd Street Gourmet Deli, open 24 hours. They've got a huge buffet with cooked foods, a salad bar, there's deli sandwiches, a noodle bar, a quick snack, or a big meal. You can sit indoors or even outdoors at a sidewalk restaurant type setting. And with these kind of big tables, maybe you'll get into a conversation with some New Yorkers or other tourists looking for a food bargain. Typical of New York delis, the pace in here is pretty quick, especially when you're ordering your food. You want to know what to order or you'll quickly lose the clerk's attention. That's a bonus for everybody because you're not going to be wasting your time. The self-service buffet is quickest of all, and you just take what you want, put it on the plate, and they weigh the plate and ring you up at the cashier. It's not a place with waiter service. And even though they call it the Gourmet Deli, don't expect too much. It's just good, decent food. When you spot a small empty lot like this, you can expect a 80-story needle tower to go up soon at multi-million prices that scrape the stratosphere. Lined with prestigious shops, Fifth Avenue is consistently ranked among the most expensive and elegant shopping streets in the world. The Apple Store on Fifth Avenue near Central Park is one of New York's most photographed buildings with its innovative glass cube. In the mid-1990s, this shopping district was ranked as having the world's most expensive retail spaces on a cost per square foot basis, although many other streets worldwide have caught up with it. Fifth Avenue was recently declared to be one of the greatest streets to visit in the country by the American Planning Association. Fifth Avenue's commercial heartland is one of the world's great urban vistas, always packed with pedestrians and lined with exclusive department stores and boutiques too numerous to fully mention. To give you some idea, you've got all the usual luxury suspects, including Vuitton, Tiffany, Gucci, Prada, Armani, Hilfiger, Cartier, Omega, Chanel, Harry Winston, Ferragamo, Bulgari, Pucci, De Beers, and of course, Saks Fifth Avenue. It's not all luxury here, however. On Fifth, you'll find many reasonably priced familiar stores that really make a nice part of the mix, including some sketchy down market. There's actually a lot of tacky tourist shops, fake luggage stores, going out of business signs, and then you've got the side streets, which really have some authentic, old-fashioned New York-style retail to enjoy. A bit more down to earth than Heavenly Fifth. If you really want to focus a lot of your attention here, there are some hotels to pick from, ranging in price from budget to ultra-luxury. Continuing back down 5th, we turn on 42nd Street to reach Grand Central Terminal, one of the great railway stations of the world and perhaps New York's most famous interior space. Although the main entrance is in front along 42nd Street, the entrance most used is at the corner of Vanderbilt and 42nd. The cavernous space is always filled with bustling crowds, especially at rush hour. The huge central room is called the Main Concourse, 275 feet long, 120 feet wide, and 125 feet high, nearly the size of a football field. The terminal is one of the world's top 10 most visited tourist attractions with 23 million annual visitors, not even counting the train and subway passengers. The Main Concourse has an elaborately decorated astronomical ceiling in which illuminated constellations of the zodiac twinkle. The ceiling with 2,500 stars is inaccurate due to an error in painting, because some stars appear correctly as they would from Earth, others are reversed, as if looking from God's viewpoint, looking down from above us. The enormous size and lavish use of marble on floors as well as walls give the concourse an aspect of grandeur that's emphasized by shafts of sunlight pouring through the 75-foot windows. Ticket booths are along one wall, although many now stand unused or have been repurposed since the introduction of ticket vending machines. The distinctive architecture has earned it several landmark designations, including as a U.S. National Historic Landmark. The four-faced brass clock on top of the information booth is perhaps the most recognizable icon, and It's often used as the meeting place. Construction began in 1907 and the terminal opened in 1913. At that time, it was the biggest train station in the world, both in size of the building and the number of tracks. The terminal has restaurants as well as delis, bakeries, and a gourmet and fresh food market, such as the Oyster Bar and various fast food outlets, including a Shake Shack surrounding the dining concourse on the level below the main concourse. This commuter and intercity railroad terminal has 44 platforms, which is more than any other train station in the world, and an amazing 67 tracks on 2 levels. Park Avenue is blocked by the building and rises to the second-story level by a highway bridge over 42nd Street, then divides right and left to encircle Grand Central and returns to grade at 46th Street. A sculptural group called Glory of Commerce sits atop the terminal facade, featuring Hercules, Minerva, and Mercury. At its unveiling in 1914, the 40-foot-high trio was considered the largest sculptural group in the world. In the middle, the 13-foot-wide clock is the world's largest example of Tiffany glass. The Pan Am building, now called MetLife, towering above Grand Central Terminal, was completed in 1963. The space in front of Grand Central on 42nd Street and Vanderbilt Avenue sides is occupied by stores along a block named Pershing Square in honor of General John J. Pershing. The city bike racks nearby make it easy for commuters to get around.
Take the bike, ride across town like I will, a little over a mile. It takes me about 7 minutes instead of a 15-minute walk, and you enjoy it. You can also do it on a weekly pass and a daily pass.
All around the terminal, skyscraper office buildings and large hotels have developed, with clubs, stores, and restaurants in this Grand Central zone. Next, we're walking 1 block over to Madison Avenue, which leads north from here and goes for 30 charming blocks. The Midtown section in the 40s and 50s has that Manhattan skyscraper look to it, giant buildings, many beautiful shop fronts, and offices towering overhead. You'll come across this large orange metal sculpture. It's a stabile by Alexander Calder, created in 1975. It sits on a broad sidewalk out front of the IBM building. Enter the IBM Public Indoor Garden Atrium to see a bamboo forest while relaxing on their comfortable seats. These giant buildings got density bonuses and many tax breaks by providing this kind of public space, such as this atrium, which is one of the most popular indoor plazas in the city. We are plunging into a very worthwhile 20 blocks, which can be nicely enjoyed along Madison Avenue with serious window shopping, people watching, and looking up at the building peaks. The shops and sights along the way will keep you thoroughly entertained. However, there is just too much ground to cover in New York, and you cannot see it all if you go into every interesting shop or pause to analyze all the significant buildings. See if you can move like a New Yorker in high speed to cover more territory. Or better yet, spend at least 1 week on your visit to New York so that you can relax and be able to cover most of the important neighborhoods. And there's a lot to see, as we've been showing you in our video series on New York. You've heard about the New York Minute. It's like a split second in which a lot of things get done. New York is quick. In fact, when you're walking, be sure not to take up the entire sidewalk because you're going to be blocking some speeding New Yorker coming up behind you. The inevitable sidewalk scarf vendor is a reminder it's not all glitz and glamour here on Madison Avenue, but this street is definitely upscale. In fact, it has really changed in recent decades. In the previous century, there were more little shops, independent merchants, and quirky little places that you could stop and poke around. Now it's really changed. It's one big chain store after another. Still very worthwhile to see. We're in the Upper East Side, entered that rarefied atmosphere of the blue blood territory, the multi-million mansions, and the nice side streets. Be sure to have a look as you walk along Madison and the other avenues down the side streets and see where the super rich live. You don't have to take out a second mortgage to dine in some of these restaurants, such as Amaranth with a delightful open air and sidewalk ambience. The former Whitney Museum on Madison has been taken over by the Metropolitan Museum of Art as a showcase for their contemporary collection. We have another movie about the Met and the new Whitney and the modern that you can find in our video series on New York. Ralph Lauren's American flagship store is located in this Renaissance Revival chateau at the corner of 72nd Street. It's just as beautiful inside as out. Continuing our avenue stroll now, south on Park Avenue and then up a little bit on Lexington. Park Avenue, most famous for its namesake landscape median that runs down the middle with beautiful trees and greenery, nicely planted. Sometimes you'll see flowers there. St. Bartholomew's Episcopal Church, commonly called St. Bart, is celebrating its 100th anniversary. It's been named a national landmark, designed with a mix of Romanesque and Byzantine features, especially with that towering dome. Looking south, we see the Helmsley Building, and behind it, the MetLife Tower once again. One of the most famous buildings in New York is the Lever House, that green glass box structure, very innovative in its day, one of the first ever built in the international style. And just across the street, another early modern architectural landmark, the Seagram's Building, designed in 1958 by Mies van der Rohe and Philip Johnson. Subsequent buildings were designed with similar open plazas to give them density and height bonuses, but these are less successful, giving us these empty urban spaces, a place that office workers can smoke. Lexington is one of the most interesting of New York avenues. It still retains a lot of its earlier character and quality, not quite so yuppified and gentrified as the other avenues that we've been walking on, all of which have been lovely, but Lexington is especially nitty-gritty and a fine place to end our walking tour of New York's grand avenues. New York Central Park is a beautiful pleasure ground of meadows, ponds, forests, and trails. Nature at its best, surrounded by the Great Wall of Manhattan. The park is one of the world's most visited places, with an amazing 42 million annual visitors, putting it into the planet's top 3 most popular destinations, along with Times Square and the Las Vegas Strip. And although it is the most filmed area in the world, we are presenting you yet another movie about it, with our own personal interpretation describing the sights, filling you in on the history, and showing the beauties in both summer and winter, when it sometimes becomes a wonderland covered in a white blanket. We'll share more winter scenes with you later in the movie. The map shows the route that will take you on, walking around, stopping at a clock, continuing on to the Central Park Zoo, New York's oldest, down to the pond where we see ducks and a stone bridge and beautiful walkways, continuing our walk over to the west side and then turning around and doubling back, coming out to the main entrance, which is at the Grand Army Plaza. Fifth Avenue forms the entire eastern border of the park, so that makes a convenient route to get into the park through various gates in the wall. There are numerous pedestrian pathways, or you could take a horse carriage tour. The pedestrian paths go beneath several roadways through these attractive underpasses. You'd never know there's automobile traffic through the park. Delacorte Clock is one of the most beloved monuments in all the parks of New York City. It features 6 whimsical bronze sculptures depicting a concertina playing elephant, a kangaroo playing horns, a bear with a tambourine, and a hippo playing the violin, a goat playing the pipes, a penguin on drums, as well as 2 monkeys with hammers that strike the bell. It's always a big hit with the kids. The clock was conceived as a modern version of musical clocks found in Europe and belfries in churches and city halls dating back to the Middle Ages. Central Park Zoo is next to the clock on the east edge of the park at 5th Avenue, facing East 64th Street, next to the Arsenal. The zoo contains a varied collection of wild animals, and there's also a casual restaurant here. You can watch the sea lions from the public walkway without paying admission to go inside. Other animals include penguins, snow leopards, snow monkeys, grizzly bear, red panda, cranes, and lemurs. The zoo began in the 1860s as a menagerie, thus making it the first official zoo to open in New York. The zoo was modified in 1934 with some expansion, and then it was completely rebuilt in the 1980s to create more naturalistic animal habitats. In the southeast corner of the park, just below the zoo, is the pond, a calm oasis with pleasant walkways and benches around it, and an area of 3.5 acres. The pond is located near one of the busiest entrances to Central Park at Grand Army Plaza, and always has people around admiring it, but still it provides an atmosphere of serenity and solitude. This pond has a special endearing quality because it's one of the first things that you might see when you're entering the park from Midtown Manhattan. A beautiful touch of nature right next to the skyscrapers of the city. And the pond looks perfect, like something out of a painting, because, well, it was created to look that way by careful landscape planning. I had a chance to talk to a couple of the park employees who were there feeding the ducks and monitoring conditions for the habitat.
We have ducks, we have fish in there, we have turtles.
Look, there's 3 turtles right there. Look, 1, 2, 3.
The park employs 250 people, and there are another 3,000 volunteers who help with the maintenance and the gardening and generally taking care. The very picturesque Gapstow Bridge is a stone bridge built from the local schist. It's one of the most iconic landmarks in the park. We'll have a slightly different kind of look at the bridge coming up in a few minutes in the wintertime, surrounded by snow. If the pond is all you see in your visit to Central Park, you're doing quite well. If you don't have much time to walk around and see the rest of the park, at least get here to the southeast corner and enjoy some time at the pond. You don't have to worry about getting lost in the park because you can generally see the city landmarks around, and maybe you'll be offered a map by one of the information guides. Of course, you can find maps easily online of Central Park, but just follow your nose, wander along the pathways, and relax and enjoy the visit. Sections of Manhattan bedrock are visible on the surface throughout the park, the original Manhattan schist. We've made our way around to the southeast corner of the park, which is the major entrance by Grand Army Plaza, where you're going to run into some traffic. There's some vehicles, you've got your hot dog stands and kiosks set up. A sudden contrast, some culture shock, bringing you back into the city proper. The plaza also has the Pulitzer Fountain of Abundance, designed by Carl Bitter and financed by Joseph Pulitzer. At the top of the fountain is a bronze statue of a Roman goddess Pomona, a celestial spirit who watched over gardens, forests, and orchards. And now the same plaza in the winter. The Sherman statue is the monument of special interest here. It was the last major work of Augustus Saint-Gaudens.
One of the advantages of coming to New York in January is you might run into some snow. And if you do, by all means, come up to Central Park to really enjoy it. Even if it's a light snowfall that disappears from the city street right away, the snow is going to be covering the beautiful hills and rocks, and you'll see the pond frozen over. It's really like a picture postcard come to life.
In our case, we were staying at Times Square in January, and there was a light snowfall overnight that was sticking a little bit at Times Square. It was lovely to see in the pre-dawn darkness the white snow on statues and railings and chairs and tables all around a rather empty Times Square at that hour of the morning. But the snow was not sticking on streets where it just melted as it was landing. So we wanted to get up to Central Park to see if it was going to be covered, and fortunately it was. By the time we got back to Midtown later in the morning, all the snow seemed to have melted down there. If you should happen to be in Manhattan when there's a snowfall, even if it's a light snowfall, head up to Central Park, where the snow in much of the rest of the city is going to melt right away on the black asphalt. You'll find that Central Park can become a magical wonderland. As you might imagine, there is quite a complicated history to the creation of Central Park. Prior to becoming a park in mid-19th century, this land was occupied by Irish immigrants and free blacks who had purchased the land where they raised livestock, built churches and cemeteries, and lived as community for over 50 years. From 1853 to 1857, about 1,600 residents were evicted under the rule of eminent domain to make way for the park. The Park Commission paid off the owners of 7,500 private different lots within the park area and dealt with many owners of the adjacent properties. Construction began in 1858 when the contract to design and build was awarded to Frederick Law Olmsted and his partner Calvert Vaux, and by later that year some parts were already open to the public. The park was finished by 1873, some years employing 4,000 laborers using picks and shovels, along with sophisticated large earth-moving machinery. By the end, more than 10 million cartloads of material had been transported out of the park, including soil and rocks, and more than 4 million trees, shrubs, and plants, representing about 1,500 species, were transplanted into the park. Olmsted was not only our foremost 19th century landscape architect, but a great writer and philosopher as well, who made extensive travels in Europe to study parks there. In his proposal, Olmsted said that, quote, "The primary purpose of the park is to provide the best practicable means of healthful recreation for the inhabitants of all classes. It is of great importance," he said, "as the first real park made in this country, a democratic development of the highest significance on which much of the progress of art and culture in this country is dependent." In describing the need for such a huge park, unprecedented in American history, Olmsted correctly predicted that, quote, "The island would soon be occupied by buildings and paved streets, that millions upon millions of people were to live their lives upon this island, and that its inhabitants would suffer from these crowded conditions." "The time will come," he said, "when New York, which at that time had only 500,000 residents, will be built up and converted into formations for rows of monotonous straight streets and piles of erect buildings. Then the priceless value of this picturesque ground will be more perceived and more fully recognized." Thanks to Olmsted and the far-sighted, brilliant politicians of the 1850s, we now have a place where everybody, rich or poor, young and old, a city resident or a visitor, can find pleasure and health within its boundaries. Right next to Central Park at the southwest corner, you'll find Columbus Circle, which is the location of the Time Warner Center, one of the largest multi-purpose complexes in the city. 750 feet high, these twin towers have a mix of residential, commercial, and retail spaces, including this deluxe, ultra-luxury shopping mall that's really a lot of fun to have a walk through. You've even got several affordable cafes in with this mix of high-end shops, and there's a very large Whole Foods down in the basement, a supermarket for the neighborhood. The Time Warner Center was constructed between the year 2000 and 2003, and by 2006 it became the most valuable commercial property in the city at $1.1 billion. There's a penthouse apartment that rents for $125,000 a month, highest price in the city. And around the corner you can get breakfast for $2.50, amidst all these high-end properties like another skyscraper needle going up on West 55th. It's a neighborhood in transition. We are taking you on a quick subway ride to the Upper West Side, one of New York's most popular high-end residential neighborhoods. We'll take you up Broadway starting from 72nd Street and walk on up to Zabar's, one of the great food stores of the city, and then continue over to Amsterdam Avenue for a few blocks, the two main streets of the Upper West Side. Zabar's Food Store is a legend. It's the most famous store on the Upper West Side, that's for sure. It's been here in the same location for 80 years. A combination of New York Jewish deli and expanded specialty food store. We'll bring you on an extensive tour inside Zabar's a little bit later in the program. The side streets up here are mostly residential with very expensive apartments. There's very good bus service up here. For example, if you want to go all the way over to the east side through Central Park, you take the M86. On West 72nd, you can also catch a bus that will take you across Central Park to the Upper East Side. And you can get up here by subway. Lines 1, 2, and 3 go through the 72nd Street station. It's a beautiful entry structure built in 2002 of steel and glass in the old style. The entrance across the street is an original structure that was built in 1904. Just to the north, you'll find Verdi Square with a statue of that great Italian composer. This stretch of Broadway we're showing you between 72nd and 80th Streets is really a lovely place to stroll. It's the heart of the Upper West Side. Shops, restaurants, cafes, lovely side street. Occasionally a little bit noisy. Stand on any corner long enough and you're going to hear the sirens going by. It's lots of people out, very safe place, characteristic of the high-level residential neighborhoods of the city. You're reminded this is mostly a place for locals who are out shopping for groceries, among other things. There's not that many tourists up in this neighborhood, nothing like Times Square or, say, down in Greenwich Village. This is a little bit more of the authentic slice of the city. Did somebody say slice? Oh yeah, you can get pizza by the slice in a lot of these neighborhood eateries. And now for the finest of all foods in the neighborhood, we are bringing you back into Zabar's, as promised earlier. Along with the famous food store, they also have a cafe that makes a great place for a light meal. A place for a quick bite. Breakfast on the go maybe, or some grilled paninis and home-style soup with a cup of Zabar's famous coffee. Sit down at the big communal table and you'll strike up a conversation with some New Yorkers, no doubt. You'll find fresh baked goods, of course the New York bagel, or how about a ham and cheese sandwich on a croissant. At the back left corner, an unmarked door leads to the public toilet. We're going to take a leisurely stroll now through the main food market. It's almost like a Google Earth view. As we walk along, you'll see these shelves are just stocked with great items. Many of them with the Zabar's brand on the wrapping, so that makes some convenient presents to bring home. Some of their specialties are cheeses, olives, smoked fish, and gourmet black peppercorns. For a retail store, Zabar's has a remarkable and long history. 80 years in business, 3 generations operating it, and the family business is still going strong. Among their principles, they say never ever stint on quality, offer fair value, and last but not least, keep searching for the new and wonderful. For example, they have introduced to New York some very later famous products such as brie, sun-dried tomatoes, and gnocchi. They were able to expand the store in the 1970s, stretching nearly the entire length of the block, making Zabar's one of the largest supermarkets in Manhattan. Of course, Manhattan has several Whole Foods, and we've shown you Italy in our Lower Manhattan episode. That's a large Italian chain, but Zabar's was the original. Their deli counters have a good variety of prepared foods, dinner cooked already for these busy New Yorkers who are on the run, heading from work back to the apartment late in the day. And of course, for those who do cook, all of the gourmet items are available right here. Their cheese department is a unique emporium offering over 600 different types of cheese from around the world, selling over 7 tons every week. The other street of the Upper West Side you must visit is 1 block over, Amsterdam Avenue. It seems to come more alive at night rather than daytime, when the locals are out taking a stroll, looking for dinner in one of the many restaurants along Amsterdam, or perhaps just a beer at the neighborhood pub. There are not many hotels in this neighborhood, but it's a fine place to get a Airbnb or some kind of vacation rental. Then you can live like a local and easily get around with all of the public transit. To a subway and bus, no problem. You can get all over Manhattan from here. For example, going across Central Park to the Upper East Side from 86th Street on the public bus. We have other episodes about Central Park and the Upper East Side, so take a look for them in our collection. For now, you're getting a quick taste of that journey. I'd like to finish with a look at the newest subway line, the 2nd Avenue. Really quite spectacular to see how beautiful these stations are, so modern and clean. Escalators take you down to a concourse. You can choose your direction, north or south, and continue on down to the tracks. It took a tremendous amount of work, originally proposed in 1919, but construction only began in 1972, then it was halted, then continued, and finally it was opened in 2017. At a cost of $5 billion, and the next phase is planned to finish in 2030, extending to 125th Street. Crossroads of the world, or perhaps it's center of the universe. Whatever you call it, Times Square is one amazing and busy place. We're going to bring you now on a detailed exploration of this unique intersection in the middle of Manhattan. Electric heart of the city, packed with honking taxis, pedestrian mobs, giant billboards lighting the sky, Broadway shows all around, and some 100 places to eat and drink. With a constant stream of street theater, performers of all kinds out on the sidewalk, putting on a show and drawing big crowds.
Not that close, sir! Luigi! You don't...
350,000 people passing through every day, many of them locals on their way to work. How busy is it? Times Square is the most visited place in the world, packed with over 131 million people each year, a mix of locals and visitors. That's according to the official organization, the Times Square Alliance. 22% of all money spent by visitors in New York is spent within Times Square, totaling $5 billion in annual retail, entertainment, and hotel sales. Not surprising considering how many hotel rooms are available in this neighborhood and how all the Broadway theaters are right here. A ticket will cost you $250, but there is a way you can buy it for half price, as we're going to show you right now. Get the tickets for half price on the day of performance at the TKTS booth here at 48th Street. There's normally a long line of bargain hunters, which you can minimize by showing up when they open or just before closing. Their hours are 11 to 7. If you are coming back to purchase for a second show during your visit, you can cut to the front of the line by speaking to the agent and showing your old ticket. So be sure to hang on to that ticket. You're in the heart of Theater District, so take advantage and go to a couple of shows. Steps above the booth are a great place to sit and enjoy the perfect view. And come back again in the evening for the dazzling light show. We'll show you a lot more of Times Square at night coming up in a few minutes. Nearly all of the theaters are within 3 or 4 blocks of Times Square, so it makes it very easy to get there on foot. Can't show you any theater scenes here because photography is not allowed during the performance, so you'll have to go there in person. Musicals and comedies are always the popular favorites. Another fun activity is a city tour on an open-top bus. You'll notice there's a large pedestrian area here. It used to be different. Broadway was open to traffic, 7th Avenue, also lots of cars, trucks, and buses going by, and you just had the sidewalks. But in 2009, Mayor Bloomberg decided, with careful planning, to shut down Broadway, keep the cars off the road, and turn it over to the pedestrians. A bold move that was originally opposed by local businesses and traffic interests who thought that it would hurt business and create gridlock on adjacent streets, which were already over capacity. But the mayor persisted, and it became a big hit. immensely improving the experience. Success of this pedestrianized project has become a model for other cities around the country. If it can happen here, it can happen anywhere. Even before this pedestrian transformation, a lot of efforts were made in cleaning up Times Square. Now it's clean and safe, loaded with family entertainment. Times Square is the antithesis of what it once was, yet still bursting with raw urban energy. The merchants got together and formed an association that has revitalized this area as one of the major commercial and entertainment districts of the world. In the 1980s, the clothing chain Gap was one of the first businesses to set up a brand new retail shop, recently expanded to become that chain's largest outlet, and it's open every day until 2 a.m. The first Gap got the rejuvenation off to a great start, followed by Disney, who bought out the Amsterdam Theater on 42nd Street in the mid-1990s and put in Lion King, transforming a seedy, rundown block into a family festival. Another of the prime events in this rebirth was the construction of the Marriott Marquis Hotel in 1985, with 1,900 rooms in a 50-story tower. You can stop and have a look inside and ride the glass elevator, use the facilities, have a drink, enjoy the huge atrium. There are some who say Times Square has gone too far in this direction. They criticize it as being more of a theme park rather than a gritty urban neighborhood that it once was. These costume characters can be a lot of fun for some visitors. Maybe get your picture taken as the Statue of Liberty, but for others, they're a pain in the neck. They can be a little annoying, pestering you to take pictures, for which you pay them, of course. And so the city has restricted where they can stand into one set area. Used to be they could walk around on the sidewalk anywhere in Times Square, but no longer, so it's a lot better now. In the 1980s, things had gotten so bad at Times Square with the drugs and the crime problem and deteriorating buildings and lack of city funding that it had reached a point that urban planners gave up on saving Times Square and came up with a nightmare plan to replace it completely with gigantic, sterile office towers. Fortunately, those misguided plans fell through and new, wholesome businesses began spontaneously opening, rediscovering this prime spot as the city's gold mine, filled with pedestrians looking for fun and ready to shop. The city's biggest subway station is right here, so get a one-week Metro card for cheap riding and save some more money at the little food wagons. The map shows Times Square's location in a busy tangle of streets at the intersection where Broadway and 7th Avenue come together between 42nd and 47th Streets. You see, it's not a square. It looks more like a bow tie, two triangles put together, along with many blocks of side streets. It's easy to just meander and wander any which way with this big pedestrian zone, but one trick you might try is do a circumnavigation. Walk all the way around the perimeter. It's just 1 kilometer. You could do it in the morning, afternoon, and do it again at night. You'll be bombarded with visual stimuli that you could never catch in one passing. You'll get a lot out of repeat visits to this spot night and day. It's another good reason for staying at a hotel that's nearby. Makes it more convenient. Each time you come, you're going to see something different, such as the naked cowboy who's here just about every day right before noon. This guy has gotten rich with his appearances. He's been at it for 20 years. Performances don't only happen inside these Broadway theaters. You're going to find it all around you on the streets. There are entertainers, and just the simple fact of urban street life is entertaining in itself, especially here. Even the construction trucks can provide a little amusement for you. The city is always growing. With so many millions of people living here, one of the occasional downsides is places get a little crowded. You might have to wait online. You also want to come back here at night to appreciate the blazing lights. Perhaps that's when it's at its best. So that's a great time to stroll through the neon gulch and feel the electric pulse of the city brightening up the sky like noon. Don't worry, this is one of the safest neighborhoods in town. There are a large number of artistic and cultural events that take place here in Times Square, and generally they're free. They can draw some big crowds. Look at all these people. What could they be gathered for? It's the season opening of the Metropolitan Opera, which has been broadcast live up on the big screens in Times Square for the past 12 years. They set up 2,000 seats, and you don't need a ticket. It's all free and first come, first served. It takes place at the north end of Times Square between 46th and 47th Street on what's called Duffy Square, and Broadway Plaza between 43rd and 44th. There's also standing room all around for at least another 1,000 people, and generally there's plenty of space to enjoy it. During intermission, there are food and drinks for sale from the Times Square Market food kiosks. Times Square is an outdoor festival with many other events happening throughout the year, coordinated by an organization called Times Square Arts, who collaborates with contemporary artists, with singers, painters, sculptors, actors, poets, electronics, digital, arts of all kinds, shapes, and forms. You can find the complete schedule of entertainment online. Just Google their website, Times Square Art. Perhaps you'll be surprised by a snowstorm. We got up early one morning and stepped out before breakfast, before the crowds got there, and the place was covered in snow. This could happen anytime between late October and early April. But if it's a light dusting, it's probably going to disappear pretty quickly, so get out there and take a look while you can. We decided to go up to Central Park to have a look in hopes that the snow would still be there and covering more of the ground, as we've shown you in another movie in our series on New York, and sure enough, Central Park was all blanketed in white. By the time we got back to Midtown, the snow was all gone. Times Square extends beyond Broadway and 7th Avenue for a few blocks in each direction in the Times Square district, and there you'll find many more shops, including some pop-ups like this temporary shopping center. Portable kiosks packed with affordable merchandise on an empty lot. There are hundreds of places to eat around Times Square, and many of them are really fantastic. We enjoyed P.S. Kitchen. They have richly artisanal foods that engages all of your senses, and it's all vegan, prepared in classic French style with finest quality ingredients. On West 46th between 7th and 8th. All profits are donated to charity. You'll gain a good viewpoint looking down at the city from Gulliver's Gate, where you can travel the world in miniature, seeing hundreds of famous sights all in one place. Located on West 44th between 7th and 8th, just half a block off of Times Square. Gulliver's Gate is the largest interactive museum of miniatures in the world. It occupies a full city block wide, 50,000 square feet. With highlights from more than 25 cities spread out across 5 continents. It's proven quite popular on TripAdvisor, where it's already gotten 1,600 reviews in its opening year, and 91% of those reviews are either excellent or very good. The exhibit features some 1,000 buildings and 100 bridges. There's a couple of hundred cars that buzz around, there's trains that move, boats, cable cars, merry-go-rounds, windmills. It's a kinetic display. Kids love it, but maybe adults appreciate it even more, especially for those who have done some traveling. It's really all kind of silly with the juxtaposition of buildings that don't really belong right next to each other, but there it is. It's all part of a stage set in miniature. London, St. Petersburg, Moscow. Oh, and the trains. Eventually, they're going to have 1,000 different trains with 12,000 cars, all set to HO scale. It's going to be like the world's biggest and most elaborate train set. They feature a mix of natural settings and historic buildings and some modern marvels. This is a high-tech operation with so many moving parts. It's controlled almost like an airport or a major train station. They assemble and create many of the pieces right here in their laboratory, and there's artists around the world who have also contributed their works. You'll discover Angkor Wat. There's a big Asia section that winds through India, Cambodia, Singapore, Malaysia, and on into China. They're open every day from 10 a.m. till 8 p.m. Last entry is 1 hour before closing, so it makes a nice evening activity. It does get kind of busy around midday, so early or later in the day is best for your visit. You'll find their informative website at gulliversgate.com, and that tells you all about the prices and background information. Of course, it's named after Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift, about the miniature world of the Lilliputians and other strange places. They're up on the second floor with an inconspicuous doorway at street level that you would never dream leads into such a vast experience. The creators call it their love letter to the world. You are going to discover the top 4 art museums in New York in this brief summary, starting out with the Met, our nation's best art museum. Then we'll bring you inside the Frick, a small private art museum with nothing but masterpieces. Then we'll move along to the Museum of Modern Art, take you out in the sculpture garden, and bring you to Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night and many other famous modern paintings. Finally heading down to Lower Manhattan to see the new Whitney with a superb modern and contemporary collection. Starting out with the Met, we'll work our way down south along Fifth Avenue to the Frick, down to the MoMA, and Lower Manhattan, the Whitney. The grand facade of the Metropolitan Museum of Art is along Fifth Avenue between 80th Street and 84th Street. The museum is 4 blocks long, extending for 300 meters. One of the world's largest art museums. It's got 2 million square feet and 2 million works of art, so it would take quite a while to see everything. Try and come back a couple of times. Most people start in the Great Hall, which is a wonderful first impression, where you buy your tickets, you can check your bags. It leads to classical sculpture on one side, Egyptian on the other, and medieval in the back. Impressionism is always a favorite, loving Renoir, Monet, Pissarro, and much more. The Met has one of the largest collections in the world, so you might want to head there first while you're fresh, through the gallery with some Rodin statues, featuring some of his most famous bronze and marble works, including Balzac. Altogether, the museum has 50 statues by that French master, including The Thinker, Hand of God, and The Tempest. The history of Impressionism begins in Paris in 1874 when the first exhibit was held, and that's about the same time that the Met was beginning to form its collection. The museum opened at this location in 1880 and has been expanding ever since. The museum gets over 7 million annual visitors, which makes it the second most popular art museum in the world, just behind the Louvre. If you are not one of those people fortunate enough to visit the museum, you can see the collection on their website. They have a phenomenal service available to you with 400,000 works of art available for free for digital download. And these are public domain. Just go to their website. It's metmuseum.org/art/collection, and you will find the works there. You can easily search and enjoy your favorites. According to the museum's website, you are welcome to use images of artwork in the public domain for any purpose, including commercial and non-commercial use, free of charge, without requiring any permission from the museum. At the end of this video, we'll present you a 3-minute slideshow with dozens of more beautiful paintings. Stick around. The collection is vast, covering all major styles of art for thousands of years. A Spanish courtyard was shipped over from Europe and reassembled in this quiet space just next to the Great Hall. From the second floor, there's a nice view looking down into that front lobby. You can also look down into the medieval weapons gallery, famous for its band of knights on horseback, all covered in armor. This courtyard with its wonderful steel and glass canopy gives the feeling of being outdoors while you're inside, connecting to the American collection with cafes in the middle. They have 5 paintings by Vermeer. For many, the Egyptian collection will be a major highlight. There are some paintings, there's a lot of jewelry, there are statues, of course, sarcophagi, and mummies. All sorts of items that illustrate the religion of the Egyptians and the daily life. The rooms housing the Egyptian collection on the ground floor of the North Wing contain a documentary as well as an artistic record of the ancient culture of the Nile Valley from prehistoric times to the introduction of Christianity. Tombs of nobles and figures of gods in which the religion and metaphysics of Egypt find expression are surrounded by painted bas-reliefs, wooden funerary models, alabaster renderings, household and farm implements, small bronze statues of cat gods, and murals illustrating the life of the common people. But the main attraction is the Temple of Dendur. It's the only ancient Egyptian temple in North America, and it's housed in this spectacular glass gallery. It was donated to America by Egypt in 1968 in appreciation for our help with the rescue of sites affected by construction of the Aswan Dam. The medieval galleries take you back to the Middle Ages, almost as if you'd entered an ancient cathedral, surrounded by Gothic statues and paintings and fabrics and textiles from the era. Contrast that with the contemporary art of David Hockney. It was a special exhibit that was on when we were there. You won't find it now, but here's a visual summary of all the wonderful paintings and video installations by that great living artist, David Hockney. You see, the Met collection spans history from 5,000 years ago right up until tomorrow. Although now in his 80s, Hockney is so innovative, he's creating paintings on an iPad that you can see being created in this video display. At the same time, the Met was putting on a blockbuster exhibit of works by Michelangelo, including his sculpture of the young archer, and many, many drawings by that greatest of all Renaissance artists. The Met assembled works from 50 different collections to put together this amazing exhibit. It will be gone now by the time you're watching this show, but at least we give you a visual summary of what was once there. And there are always other special exhibits, amazing displays happening at the Met every day. The collection of classical sculpture features great works from ancient Greece and Rome. The Met has been ranked the best art museum in the world for the last 3 years by the readers of TripAdvisor, who are an experienced group of people. They list the Met as their #1 destination in New York. Continuing 10 blocks south along 5th Avenue, we reach the Frick Collection at East 70th Street, a much smaller art museum in a former mansion built for Henry Clay Frick. The indoor garden court is the spectacular centerpiece of this small museum, with the art galleries all around it. Designed in a way to respect the original mansion and give you the feeling that you are visiting as a guest in a palatial house rather than a museum. Officially called the Frick Collection, it's one of the world's finest small art museums with a high-quality collection of old master paintings and fine furniture. There are so many masterpieces, you'll want to take your time and spend at least a couple of hours here. Located in an upscale residential community that has a friendly neighborhood feeling to it. We're on 5th Avenue facing Central Park, so you might want to cross the street and take a little stroll through the garden if you like, or just walk on down the avenue. In our case, we're going to hop on the city bus, traveling down to 53rd Street to visit yet another art museum. The Museum of Modern Art, also called MoMA, is America's premier exhibition space for modern and contemporary art. Founded largely by the Rockefeller family, it opened in this location in 1939, and it's been growing larger ever since. In 1983, it doubled in size, and then in 1997, it doubled again. A recent expansion by famous architect Jean Nouvel adds another 25% to its exhibit area, along with cafes and a gourmet restaurant. Starry Nights by Van Gogh is one of the favorite paintings, along with many more. Throughout all of the building expansions and construction, the museum has managed to hold on to the open space of its outdoor sculpture garden, a place to relax and gather your thoughts after being surrounded by what many consider as the best collection of modern Western masterpieces in the world. Matisse, Monet, Picasso, Mondrian, Rousseau, Van Gogh, Pollock, Warhol, Rauschenberg, Gauguin, Cézanne, Dali. From the modern, we're heading to Lower Manhattan for our final museum, the Whitney, located at the beginning of the High Line. Its new building, designed by Renzo Piano, opened in 2015. The collection includes over 600 works by some 400 artists, along with regular special exhibits. There are 4 different outdoor observation decks, which is a lovely feature. It gives you a fantastic view looking out in all directions at Greenwich Village, the Meatpacking District, over to the river, up the High Line, which we showed you in great detail in our Chelsea movie that you can find in our New York collection. After that nice outdoor break, you'll be ready to plunge back into the galleries, which contain some pieces from the regular collection and also many special exhibits. What you're seeing in the video now might not be there when you visit, but there are certain to be stimulating and provocative items that will tickle your artistic sensibilities. You can see many of the previous exhibits on the Whitney's website, which has a very extensive presentation of the permanent collection and a listing of the special exhibits going back to 2006. As promised earlier, we're closing with a slideshow of some highlights from the Metropolitan Museum of Art as a little music video for you. We have many more movies about New York. Look for them in our collection. We upload a new movie every week, so please subscribe to our channel. Then you'll be notified. And if you enjoyed the movie, how about a thumbs up? And we always welcome comments down below. It really helps us spread the word. Thank you.